Welcome everyone. On today's video, I'm with Wuckert Jr. He's Coingeek Chief Bitcoin historian, and he's also been involved in Bitcoin since, I believe, back in 2012. So long history in the Bitcoin. He knows that stuff. And yeah, first off, thanks for coming on the show, and tell us about your story, how it started in Bitcoin to start.
Cool. Thanks for having me. So in 2012, I was an owner in a printing company, a partner, and I was always a gold activist. I had been a gold activist for a long time, a big anti-Federal Reserve, sound money advocate guy. And sort of a casual acquaintance of mine connected me with a guy who needed some posters printed because he wanted to hold them up at a protest. And it's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And when it came time for him to do the pickup, he was like, "Hey, can I pay you in Bitcoin?" And I had no idea what Bitcoin was. So, it was a small job. It was, if I remember, $50 or $100 job. It was not, a big deal. So I was like, yeah, whatever. I figured it was some kind of video game token or something. And, I'm nerdy enough. So I was like, I'm sure I can figure out something to do with it. And then looking into it, I started to do research at that point to see what I could do with these Bitcoins that he set me up with. And well, then I got sucked in and went down the rabbit hole. And now it's been 8 years of Bitcoin sort of taking over my life.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I didn't know about because I read the Coingeek bio, and then I was reading it says gold bug activism. So yeah, I wasn't quite sure if that was because you were in gold before, but you probably still are anyway at this point.
Yeah.
And it's probably interesting to go over like what Peter Schiff is saying on Twitter. It's
It
pretty.
is. It's fascinating because Peter's been a big influence on me for years. I've probably been reading and watching Peter Schiff content for 15 years or more. It really started for me. I started college in 2004 or five. I don't remember now exactly, but at that point, I got into school and was like super interested in economics. I was going to be a business major and a political science major, and just wanted to basically do just talk about money and talk about the politics of money. So I actually got into the FM radio program as like sort of a elective thing to do while I was there. I ended up doing a political talk radio show talking about sound money and all of these things regularly. So there's somewhere in the universe, there's probably tapes of me from 2004 through 6 or 7, just having debates about money and gold and the gold standard and the way that banks control the flow of government power and all of that kind of stuff. So Peter's a hero. In fact, his father is too. His father's a really interesting character. He died in prison for refusing to pay the income tax because per the U.S. Constitution, the income tax is only repayable in gold. And so technically, in his opinion and in the opinions of many classical legal scholars, the United States income tax is illegal per the United States Constitution, and people don't know this because most people don't read. So,
Yeah, you're bringing something quite interesting, and I only started listening to Peter Schiff. I usually have to drive about like 45 minutes for my 45, 50 depending to go to work, and I just put usually Peter Schiff does like 46, 55 minutes
yep.
podcast. So just put on Spotify there, and I like the perspective on just like not just like crypto. Obviously, he's not a big guy into Bitcoin, but just like the overall like his understanding makes me understand. Obviously I'm in Canada, but you know it starts from the US
Yeah.
mostly for economics, right? So
Yep.
it's really important to pay attention to that. So yeah, definitely someone good to listen to. So I'm glad you're we're on the same page on that one.
For sure.
Yeah, so if we go back to right now, BTC market, what can we make out of this? I mean, the prices are going up. I think it's coming back up again this morning. What can we
Probably.
make of this and clearly understand what's going on?
You know, BTC, if it's going to be that sort of pure store of value and all of the things that they've sort of re-engineered it to be, then it's quite a bit like Tesla stock or anything else. If everybody just wants to get into it because they believe that it is going to make their purchasing power go up over time, and that's the only purpose for it, then, well, that sort of demand is self-fulfilling. These prophecies are not too complicated. And I'm actually working on an article right now talking about the IPO craze and some of the stuff from the 90s and the early 2000s. There was a whole cycle of a bunch of these things in a row that have happened over the last almost 30 years now, where there's been this opportunity because people assume the dollar is going to collapse. And I think they're right. I think the dollar will collapse at some point. And there's been people that have been benefiting from that by saying, well, everybody needs to invest in real estate, or everybody needs to invest in whatever the thing is. So BTC has become that thing for this generation since the housing bubble collapsed. And the housing bubble was pitched in very much the same way, like no down payment necessary. You don't even have to do any work. You use your credit score and you get this income property and it's going to cash flow for you. And people were paying $20,000 to take educational courses in the early 2000s to learn how to manipulate their credit score and bank loans to become a real estate mogul. And it's a very similar narrative with BTC now. You have people like Peter McCormack just said 3 weeks ago, he took out a $50,000 loan or something to buy BTC, and it's going to pay off because it has to. And this isn't my first rodeo. Investment scams are something that goes back a very long time, and they have a very similar tone. And sometimes you can make money on them for 20 or 30 years before the bubble pops on them. But I think, unfortunately, the investment thesis, the pure investment thesis of BTC is broken. It doesn't make sense that something could be, 95% of all of its volume and value and everything is just based on people trying to gather up the coin. Like there's not some other thing happening with it somewhere. Like in real estate, people live in these houses, for example, or even with gold. Everybody on that side says, well, gold isn't used for anything. It's just speculated upon. It's like, no, all of our computers are full of gold. Our phones are full of gold. Our, jewelry is gold. All kind, these SpaceX rockets and all of that are full of gold. Every kind of communications equipment, tons of medical equipment, and most electronics are full of gold, plus the value of jewelry and everything else. So to say that gold is just a store of value, and that's that's absurd. So BTC is really bonkers in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like it's keeps going up. We see the Grayscale fund. They seem to throw money into it, but it's almost as if now, looking from in perspective, it looks like it's almost like everyone's going into that trap, and then eventually the big funds, obviously they trade, right? They have the money to do it, and it doesn't impact them as much because they actually usually move the markets, right? So they get all those retail investors in, and then most of them will buy at 25K, and then next thing you know, it's at 16 or whatever. Not that it's a bad price overall, but then you'll catch a bunch of people that are stuck in there now and probably will buy high, sell low. So do you think that could be a possibility?
Oh, it is, absolutely. And, it's also a possibility that BTC does go to $100,000 or $1 million a coin too. Like bubbles go a long time. And, to anybody who's making money, to the good people, the generic person who bought some Bitcoin and wants to get rich, I hope they do get rich. Like those are the people that I hope do not get screwed. Unfortunately, I think they will, but when I have these criticisms for BTC and the culture of BTC, I'm generally talking about their advocacy culture and things like that, which I think is plainly toxic. I think it's probably illegal in a lot of instances as well. There's laws against boiler room tactics and the sort of get wrecked or stay poor, buy Bitcoin and hodl is something that laws were created about these things 20, 25 years ago, how you're not allowed to just paste your narrative about the value of your investment all over the place. It's a big problem.
Yeah, probably regulators are starting to look at that stuff even more now. We don't clearly know what the impact will be, but certainly I guess we have to wait and see what comes up. So now if we talk about Bitcoin SV, I mean, we could describe it different way. In your own words, how would you best describe it?
Um, well, the context first is that Bitcoin came out in 2009, the first week of 2009. It was a pure implementation of the Bitcoin white paper. The implementation of the white paper was a complete protocol to implement a database and a network with a set of rules. Those rules included the coin count and various things. Some of the stuff was left a little unclear. However, the software was issued with a license, and that software had a complete stack of script that allowed higher level programming across the board. And it was imperfect in many ways from a software perspective, but from a rules perspective and an economics perspective, made a lot of sense. And that's why a lot of people really liked the idea. Well, as soon as Satoshi Nakamoto left, about 2 years later in 2010, the core developers started to just take things away. They started to remove things from the script stack, and then they started to add new things to the script stack to allow it to do other things, or to specialize it toward security at the expense of its usability. And that really was the attitude from 2010 to 2017, was to just continue to keep trimming Bitcoin down more and more and more, until it was really only useful for big transfers at a high fee. But truly, the governance and really everything about the network, the entire economics of the network, are changed in BTC. So BCH forked away in late 2017 to maintain the original governance model and to restore the Bitcoin protocol. And then we had a similar thing where the BCH guys wanted to start adding scripts and stuff too, like let's re-engineer Bitcoin in our own vision, and BSV split. And then in early 2020, there was finally the complete restoration of the total Bitcoin stack. We trimmed back all of the additions to Bitcoin, and we restored all of the things that had been deprecated in the other versions. So BSV is the only existing complete implementation of the Bitcoin protocol.
Yeah, right. And I think at this point, not a lot of people can understand that, or even like,
No.
so if we're just like taking someone that's going to see Bitcoin on maybe CNBC, he sees
Mhm.
Pompliano talking about it or whatever, and then he's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I should probably look into that. So now, first thing he's going to do, probably find an exchange in their
Mhm.
country and stuff, and then they're not going to hear about Bitcoin SV, and probably the first exposure they're going to have to that will be like some influencer saying it's a scam or whatever, right?
Yep.
So I guess in that aspect, how could we, how could the community fix that, or like, is it fixable? Is it something that has to live with, or
It's funny. I have to draw a parallel to something like a completely different thing where people just won't ever see eye to eye.
yeah,
And I usually pick religious or political analogies, but I think this one is very similar to the Israel versus Palestine debate. And Israel has 6 or 7 thousand years of history in Jerusalem, and so too do Palestinian Arabs. And truly, they fought for that region, and they lived together in eras of peace and eras of war for exactly that, about 6 or 7 thousand years now. And people look at it from the outside. You have the UN, for example, will say, well, gosh, you guys could just agree to disagree and then do business anyways. And you're asking people to really change their fundamental worldview, for somebody else's peace. And it doesn't have to happen. Like we have Israeli Jews, and we have Israeli Palestinians, and we have, people that are separatists and all kinds of things. And you know what? Civil wars are like that. I mean, we in the United States still are having issues with people that want to fly a Confederate flag from a war that was lost, almost 200 years ago now. And but they look at it and say, that's our culture, man. Like, it is what it is. So, you can't expect people to change quickly. And I think it doesn't matter at this point, because just like the culture of Israel and Palestine, both people groups have amazing things about their culture, and both people groups have issues with their cultures. And they're imperfect, and that's okay, and they can coexist sometimes violently, but that's just real life. And I think to expect things to just get tied in a little bow and everything's okay, and then we can all move on, really kind of ignores the fact that we have these kind of squabbles in everyone's lives, and they affect all of us all the time. And that's just life. BSV and BTC can coexist for a time. I think the only real issue, and this will come up at some point, is the distribution of hash power. They share the total of SHA-256 global hashing power. And at some point, that will be the real fight. Like when one actually is orphaned and dies, and this could be it could be any moment, or it could be, decades from now. But that's the real linchpin that's going to need to be figured out at some point, is who gets all of the global hash rate, because it will be one of them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it seems like, I've been doing a lot of researching, and maybe I should probably do even more, because Bitcoin is so much. Like, it seems that there's so much in like crammed in 10 years plus or whatever
Yeah.
ish. So it's and then I wanted to prepare for this chat and interview, and then I was watching another of your video. I can't remember who it was with, but anyway, you were talking about the BTC that actually forked as well. Like, people don't
Mm-hmm.
know that. I think it was, 2013 you were mentioning. And can you explain that for people that don't even know about that?
So it actually happened twice. So BTC is a hard fork of a hard fork today. In 2010, there was a value overflow bug. You can Google it. You can read some of the stuff that happened on Bitcoin Talk. All of a sudden, a developer said, hey, I can't even remember now, but billions of Bitcoins were created in a block. And that's obviously a major problem. And so over the course of a few hours, and therefore lots of Bitcoin blocks, it was decided by the miners of the network, which was a very small group of people at the time, that holy cow, we need to roll back, hard fork that block. We're going to orphan this 6 hours of Bitcoin history, and we're going to continue in this new direction that has fixed that bug. So that was your first hard fork. In 2013, there was a split of the network, and a similar thing happened. It wasn't about value overflow, but some rule change in the upgraded software did a similar thing. Bitcoin split into two. Some like a number of people did not notice it. It was really one developer whose node started signaling that there was an issue. And then they had to decide, oh gosh, what do we do? Because in 2013, Bitcoin was worth $100 a coin or something. I don't remember the exact price at the moment of the split, but they had to figure out, or oh my gosh, are we having two chains, or what is this? Because you have to assume, or you have to check a number of things, like, were we attacked? Is this a series of nodes that are splitting to make an altcoin, or what is this? And so ultimately it was decided, okay, everybody, like, let's roll back. Let's switch to this node. If you're going to follow this node implementation, this is the real Bitcoin, and the other one can go on and be a split, or it can die, or whatever. And ultimately it died. But that was the chain that existed from 2009 to 2013. So the BTC of today was last hard forked just 7 years ago. And that's where it is today. So these things happen. Hard forks are not the end of the world. They can be a problem, but Bitcoin's designed to work that way. If there's a contentious split, you choose to follow the chain you follow, and then there you have
exactly. And also looking at Bitcoin Cash, there was recently another one, Bitcoin Cash, BCHA with Bitcoin ABC. And again, I wouldn't be surprised even to see Bitcoin Cash again splitting once more in the future. I think they're based off, like, was it mostly like donations? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people would get offended by that. But if you remove a couple players in that, I'm not going to name them, but that seems to be funding those flip starters. If you remove them, I don't know. I was like, who's funding that then? Where did they take their money or whatever? So I was like, it's kind of funny where it's going to end up, but I don't know if you have any words on that.
Yeah, I think BCH fundamentally is broken. When the governance model leaves proof of work and it becomes just community consensus, then Bitcoin can change. I mean, they have a hard fork every 6 months. So, and every time they go to do that upgrade, there's groups of people fighting. And when you make the the decision that as a culture that you break up the community every time you disagree, rather than forcing each other to agree and work things out, then well, it's just going to keep happening. So that's I think BCH is
Yeah.
ultimately doomed in the long run for that reason.
Yeah. And then some people sometimes mention that BSV is centralized if they mention, let's say, Coingeek and Calvin Ayre, maybe CSW, Craig Wright. They say that, oh, these guys changed the protocol, but I think wasn't it like the protocol locked or like reversed back to what it was initially? Like, how can you explain that?
Yes, if you remove all parameters that can be tinkered with by the software developers, then the software is up to, or the network is capable of whatever people are willing to compete for it to do. And so that's a big change that doesn't exist anywhere else. Every other network has protocol developers trying to figure out how to do all kinds of new things all the time. That's their full-time job, and they want to keep that full-time job. In Bitcoin SV, the protocol, the rules of the network are set in stone, and since everything is opened wide up, we don't need to have that debate anymore. If you want to try to push a gigabyte block, do it. The software allows it, so the only thing that might stop you is whether or not the other nodes on the network are capable or willing to try to accept. And so those problems solve themselves. It's you have established a foundation that can't be shaken, and then you allow economic actors to try to push the limits however they see fit. So it's a truly free market version of Bitcoin. And guys like Craig Wright, I mean, there's nothing to change. That's the real issue. Is that what would you change about Bitcoin SV? So it's wide open. The only thing that you could do is trim it down, and that's completely against the ethos of everything that we've been talking about for the last, truly 5 years or more. Yeah. But since the split, that's it. We're wide open, and there's nothing to do but trim it back, and that's certainly not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Because someone was making a comparison. I don't think he's in the BSV community, but he respects it quite a bit, and he was mentioning that it seems like the model now for BTC is based off like having fees, right? High fees. That's how they make their money, versus, let's say, BSV that is going to accommodate a lot of transactions within blocks, and then those miners will compete to get that, and that's kind of the difference between the two. Am I accurate by saying that, or?
That's correct. So at some point, and I think everybody agrees if they understand Bitcoin, even any of the versions of Bitcoin, that at some point you need to transition from the block reward subsidy to fees per block is what will pay for the security of the network. BTC wants that to be large fees per transaction and keep their blocks at 1 megabyte seemingly forever. And then on BSV, it's, maybe we have terabyte blocks in 3 to 5 years, and you get micro pennies, but if there's 500 million transactions in the block, well, then that block is very profitable that way. So the debate is whether or not people are willing to pay a very high fee per transaction, or whether over time they would prefer to pay a very low fee per transaction and have a network that just has a ton of bandwidth. So it's a philosophical debate, it's an economic debate, and it's a technical debate. But we are competing fully at this point because like they're out there. So may the best horse win the race, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. And if we talk about use case, I'm just going to mention the title of, I think it was Yahoo that presented that yesterday. Tuvalu embarks on the world's first national digital ledger infrastructure project on Bitcoin SV. So that's a big use case on that. Like, can you tell us like the what that means really for?
Yeah. So one of the things that Bitcoin was always capable of was smart contracts. A lot of people think that was something unique to Ethereum. That's not the case. Bitcoin was designed to be able to deploy a virtual computer that allows it to do all kinds of things. So what you can do, this is called a non-fungible token, or an NFT. That means each dollar, I don't know what the Tuvalu money is called, so I'm just going to refer to them as dollars. But
yeah,
if you were to if you were to issue individual dollars and they're tokenized, back and forth, they are non-fungible, they're visible as each individual currency, then it allows you to issue a certain amount of money and issue a sound sovereign money that is not Bitcoin, but it is this Tuvalu dollar. and it runs as a token on top of the Bitcoin SV network. So it gets to use the security of Bitcoin for consensus, and it is a purely digital money. Now, the interesting thing about Tuvalu is they don't have digital banking because it's a very small island. There's about 11 or 12,000 people that live on the island. And they just never adopted a digital banking system because it was unnecessary for them. But they're modern as a culture. They actually are famous in the internet community for owning the .tv domain. And they sell the .tv domain to people that want to have a .tv website. So that's a major way that they make money with their internet business on the island. So they have good internet connectivity, and they are thoughtful about how they can utilize some of their very specific strengths as this little island. And they were wise enough to take the opportunity to leapfrog away from these sort of digital centralized digital banking hubs, and they're going to have their own tokenized sovereign currency on top of Bitcoin SV, and the network will power their economy and allow them to do all of their trade without paper money. It'll be all digital money on probably mobile wallets for the most part, and it opens them up to global trade using the Bitcoin protocol. So it's a pretty exciting thing. It's something that people have been talking about doing on Ethereum for years. It's something that's been talked about, using Bitcoin as money and all of these things for a very long time. And the Bitcoin SV people are doing it, and it's been a collaboration between a bunch of actors in BSV as well. So it's a really exciting step.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big story, even though we haven't heard much about it. It just came out, I think, was it yesterday and stuff. But I think it's big, and if good things come from that, it could therefore be adopted at other places, right? And it's definitely one thing that, let's say, BTC couldn't be doing at the moment anyway.
No, not at all.
Well, at the moment and for a long time, unless they decide to change somehow, which at this point I don't think so.
Impossible.
So when we talk about other adoptions, so let's say someone wants to buy stuff online, like a bit refill cards, Dash is doing that, because you've talked to Joel recently, is big into Dash. People can use, let's say, Bitcoin, maybe Lightning or other currencies. Bitcoin Cash is used as well. Are there any steps for Bitcoin SV at the moment? Because it seems like they're more into the enterprise side of it. There's still stuff being built to really tackle that merchant aspect, or is it not a priority at the moment? What do you see from the community itself?
It's interesting because people bring up Bitcoin Cash and Dash quite a bit, for the classic, hey, I want to buy my coffee with Bitcoin, and they've done a lot of work in those areas. Roger's out there, setting up every grocery store and Crepe Hut or whatever that that will accept. But and no criticism to him. I actually think the Bitcoin.com wallet is a nice piece of software and stuff too. But the Bitcoin SV blockchain has some of the best wallets that I've seen. Period. In fact, in a retail sense, I think Handcash is actually the best wallet that I've ever seen for the ability to make payments. Now, granted, BSV is not accepted at a whole heck of a lot of places, but the guys from AnyPay who are in New Hampshire have very closely aligned themselves with the Bitcoin SV people while also accepting some of these other coins. But they've created some special features that work just with Handcash, for example. And they have a really great cash register system. And if you were to go to Keene, New Hampshire, you could be buying everything all day with Bitcoin SV. So the software and the hardware and the tools exist, but somebody has to want to use them. Now, I imagine in a place like Tuvalu, that will become much more apparent to them that, hey, I could just be accumulating BSV rather than our tokenized Tuvalan dollars and all of that. So, you start to show people that, hey, this Bitcoin thing actually works really well. And then people will say, hey, I could be accumulating this, not just by, opening up an account and making purchases, but this could just be the money that I earn. And wouldn't that be cool? So, these things are slow. And it's been 12 years of debate. And frankly, it was 10 years of debating whether or not you should use Bitcoin to buy things. And that's been the real problem. But since the split, now we get to have these conversations a little more deliberately and say, hey, this network is capable of anything you want it to be. You can transact in BSV, or you can transact in some other tokenized currency or whatever you want. But use the network, because the network allows you to do all kinds of really cool things. So I think we'll see that adoption go slowly at first, and then it'll just start to take off quickly as people, especially in some of these places. And imagine if Tuvalu is successful, that you start to see it on other Polynesian islands and then Caribbean islands and all these different places, that there's already Bitcoiners living in these places, but you have to prove that it works. And then you scale that up, and then all of a sudden you'll start to see like, oh shoot, these people are way more economically efficient than we are with their monetary system. And it's because it's based on Bitcoin. And so you got to prove it first. And this stuff is, long in the tooth, unfortunately.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and I would agree. Encash as well is probably the wallet that comes in mind when like the best seems like best wallet. Even people that don't appreciate, let's say, a BSV that much, or still have to say that admit that it's a pretty cool wallet. I mean, you can just send like we could just do like a penny transfer right now and say, how are you, or something like that with an emoji, and then you reply back with like thumbs up or something. So that's pretty cool. And obviously you can use that for payments. And then now they're with the new version, they're connecting apps and so on. So I think we're seeing like a lot more development as well with Encash. I think that's terrific wallet, and other wallets are also good, right? Sendbee, I think, Simply Cash, Relay X, Money Button. I think they're doing Money Button is actually pretty cool to use as well. So.
It is. Well, and this is what I tell everybody. There's so many unique things being created on Bitcoin SV. And each of those wallets is very, very different and very unique and very uniquely useful. Like RelayX and their the way that they connect all the apps, that's what I use for Streamanity and Twitch and all the social media stuff that's built on Bitcoin. And then Money Button for all kinds of the the apps that people want to deploy quickly too. And then I use Simply Cash as a lot like the wallets that existed a few years ago, where it's robust and it's a little more professional. It gives you more power to do different things with your Bitcoin. And so all of these things working together in the ecosystem have made it like I'm very, very satisfied with the tools in Bitcoin SV. I don't feel like I'm lost for almost anything.
Yeah, exactly. And I've even seen like a comment, I think was it Encash, and downloaded the new version, and then the comments in there, and then someone was saying like, you're misleading people, it's not the real Bitcoin and stuff. So I was like, oh, come on.
That's how it goes. It's an information war,
like we talked earlier, right? So it's ongoing battle with clearing some of the negativity and all that stuff. And so I think recently, so just talking about yourself, you just took a new role, right, with Coingeek. I think you were doing something else before, and then
I did.
What are you doing at this point with Coingeek?
Yeah, so I've always done Bitcoin stuff as sort of a professional hobby. Like I've been involved. I used to mine. I've consulted with a bunch of businesses and things, but I've never been a full-time Bitcoin person. And then just recently, all of 2020 and 2019, I was working as a cybersecurity professional, white hat hacker stuff. I was doing red team work and things, which was fun. I really liked it. But I had been doing a little bit more freelance work with Coingeek, writing articles. And in October, they said, hey, we really want to take you on. We'd like you to host conference stuff and do more, and how would you feel about coming on full time? And I was a little bit apprehensive because like, I really like just sort of being independent and having my own criticisms and things. And but it made a lot of sense because I really haven't disagreed with CoinGeek's narrative on almost anything. And when I do, I'm happy to say it. But they were really generous in saying like, well, actually, the things that you may disagree with us on, we'd really like your feedback. Like we would like you to help us be better. And so first of all, I was flattered. I have a lot of respect for Calvin and a bunch of the other people in the company. There's a lot of people that don't get named and don't get cheered about, but there's a lot of really good people working in that company too. So they brought me on to sort of help clean up the long tail narrative, which is why my title there is Chief Historian. Because I've just been around for so long. I know a lot of the people in a lot of the camps, and I don't have to research it so much because I remember who did what. I experienced a lot of these things. So sometimes I will get my facts backwards because I don't remember if something happened in 2013 or 2014. So sometimes I need to fact check myself a little bit, but I already have a much better starting point than a lot of people. And so they brought me on to help just manage that kind of stuff over in the Coingeek media side of the company. And
awesome.
It's been great. I really enjoy it. I've been only with the company now like 6 weeks in that capacity. So, maybe it gets weird at some point, but right now I'm very excited, and they're good people. They're even better than I expected. So it's a really nice thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess how you mentioned it, since you've been involved so much, I think it makes sense at this point to dedicate. And clearly from what I could see in your videos and so on, like you could talk about it without even preparing for it, obviously, right? So you know that stuff. With some of the meetings that sometimes when they did the fork in 2017, Roger Ver talks about like meetings that happen and stuff. Were you part of those meetings before?
No, I never traveled much, so I didn't do. The big one where the split really happened was the Bangkok meeting between BCH and BSV. Their real communication breakdown was in Bangkok. And then the one between BTC and BCH, there were two major ones. There was a big meeting in New York, and there was a big meeting in Hong Kong, I believe.
Okay.
So I think it was it's the Hong Kong agreement. So at all of these things, there was miners and developers and business owners. So the people that really were creating all of the value on chain to discuss what is the upgrade path. And I would have loved to have been there, but at the time, doing other things. Like I said, I was never the professional Bitcoin guy, but I was the guy who would be watching the live streams and listening to the audio and then commenting on social media and trying to share information and really digest some of the higher technical stuff and the nature of the debate and give it back to people so that they can have a informed opinion, even if they're not like a world-class developer or some kind of industrialist mining professional or whatever.
If anyone would like to check out your content, right now it's on the main website, right? Coingeek, and then do you keep articles somewhere else that people I could link them to and then put them in the description and so on?
I don't have a whole. I mean, there's stuff around that I've written because I've done some guest writing, and I do guest podcast appearances for years now. So you can find me on all kinds of channels all over the place. But if you Google my name and Bitcoin, you'll find me everywhere. So there's a lot of content to consume that way. But the main place to find me is going to be at my CoinGeek author page. And then you can find me on Twitch and Twitter. So at Twitch, I'm user292, and on Twitter, I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. And I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. everywhere. So if you want to hit me up on Telegram or Keybase or whatever, you can find me there too.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then, do you have any final words for people? Let's say that don't. That we'll close with that. If someone's looking into Bitcoin, what should they look into to make their mind on Bitcoin SV before falling into it's a scam and I'm not looking at it?
I think Bitcoin SV is unique in that to invest in Bitcoin SV is different from all of the other cryptocurrency assets. It's really uniquely not even so much a cryptocurrency. Like BTC is only valuable as an investment asset. It's the only thing you can do with it in 99% of cases. You can buy stuff with it in some places at some time, or if you need to transfer $100 million from the US to some other country in a way where there's enough liquidity to make that work for you, I guess BTC is good for that too. But those are the unique superlatives of BTC. However, on BSV, if you want to do all kinds of things, if you want to start a business that utilizes reduced payment friction or increased data integrity in some way, or launch a smart contract or create all kinds of if this then that sorts of applications that are unstoppable because they're running on the distributed consensus and in the Bitcoin virtual machine, you should look at BSV. So really, one is a giant global entrepreneurial opportunity, and the other one is a potential investment opportunity. And so you really need to figure out, who are you? Are you an entrepreneur, or are you some kind of global nomad, you want to change the world and create a business model that makes everybody's lives better and you get to profit from having changed the world? Or do you just want to hold some BTC and hope to God it goes to $1 million someday so you can retire? And that's
yeah, exactly. I think the most amount of money I think was done previously. I think for people that bought into like they have like lots of Bitcoin, then they could probably retire. I think that from this point on now, I think it'll be more difficult sort of to achieve anyway at this point. And it's not because BSV is at 170, I think it was this morning, $170 US, that it's not, you know, there's no value, right? So you got to see the value, especially if you're an investor, then early, right? So you can't just wait that it goes up high to buy then, right? So it's worth looking into it. I think they're doing a great job in that aspect, right? The community is building slowly but surely, I think. So it's something to look at for sure. So I think we'll close it there. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, Kurt. Appreciate, know lots of information about Bitcoin. I think we would need more than just like a 45 minutes, an hour to capture all that stuff. And so maybe we'll have you once more again. So thanks for
That'd be great.
coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.